So here we are at the deferred tax worksheet, and you can see that we have December 31st, 2010 here and December 31st, 2011. So I have kept the second year's numbers in here and filled out, but I'm going to show you how to create all the formulas and fill it out for the first year, the beginning balance sheet. The first thing we have is the accounts receivable, and so we need to get that number off of the balance sheet. And so all I do is a plus or an equals to say I'm doing a formula, and then click over here on the balance sheet, come up to the accounts receivable, and I want the beginning amount. You can see it's $11,835. I hit enter, and there it shows up. And if you double click up there to look at your formula, it says balance sheet to say what worksheet it's from, and then the cell reference B10. The feeder livestock is a little bit special because you might have bought calves to feed out and then resell, and if so, only the difference between what you sell them for over what you bought them for counts as income. And so here we have a spot that's yellow, so if we had bought some and we had a deduction there to take that wouldn't necessarily show up on the balance sheet, we can put something in here, but this is zero because we don't have that. So our feeder livestock, the other thing special about it is that there's more than one number, and so we could just say equals plus this number plus this number plus this number, but an easier way to do it is say equals and then type in a formula sum, opening parentheses, and then you can see that it's looking for a range. And so my range is going to be from the balance sheet, so click on the balance sheet. Here's my feeder livestock, and I want all three of those numbers. So I just click and drag down and it highlights all three. Shift and close my parentheses and then hit enter. And so now I've got the entire amount there. The number here is going to be just plus the market value minus the cost basis, and hit enter. So we have $78,665. Crops and feed inventory also is a range, and so we have to do equals SUM opening parenthesis, click on the balance sheet, and here we're going to do hay, grain, and feed. Hay, grain, potatoes, and feed. And I've got all of those highlighted. Whoops. I need to do hay, grain, potatoes, and feed. That potatoes, or the hay's not yellow, so it's throwing me off. That's my range. Hit enter. So you have $70,232. Prepaid expenses is a single number, so plus the balance sheet, come over here and click on prepaid expenses. And when you're clicking here, notice that supplies and cash invested in growing crops is just directly under prepaid expenses. So hit enter. Now my supplies and cash invested in growing crops is just right underneath here too, so I can actually just highlight this cell, get that plus sign to be small. I know that it looks more like an arrow on your screen, but when you're using Excel it'll look like a plus sign. And just copy down, and you'll notice that it automatically puts in the 1850 and 21,000 because as we copied it down, it went down one further row. And if you click back on the balance sheet over here, you'll see that it got the right numbers. So now we need the total current assets to be taxed, and that's just the sum, and then highlight your range. Hit enter, and we see $187,082. And now we need to put in the amounts that we could deduct, the accounts payable, so plus or equals, and then click on the balance sheet. These are going to be down in the current liabilities, so we've got to move down to the current liabilities and click on the accounts payable. It's zero here, but we want to keep our formulas consistent, so when we put a number into that yellow. CCC loans you don't need. I don't know why I have it in here. Accrued interest is right there. Hit enter. Accrued tax, plus or equals, click on the balance sheet, click on accrued tax, hit enter. And now the total liabilities that could be deducted, sum, and then highlight your range. You could also physically type in C13 colon C16 too into the range. So we have $18,673 of liabilities that could be deducted, $187,000 of income, and so the current assets to be taxed is equal to the current assets to be taxed minus the liabilities that we could deduct. So we owe taxes based upon what we've produced on our farm and haven't paid on, $168,000 worth of income. Our tax rate is 38%, and that's yellow, so you can put in that tax rate. And so we just take the income multiplied by the tax rate, and we have $63,995. $38,000 may sound like a lot, but when you think about it, you've got 15% for self-employment tax, because employers need to pay both the employee's side and the employer's portion. So the self-employment tax is 15%. This would be 15% of a federal tax, and then 8% for state tax. So it might be a little bit on the high side, but it's within the realm of possibility. Currently, there's actually a 2% decrease for 2011 in the amount of self-employment tax and the amount of FICA that's deducted from your paycheck of 2%. So this would actually be a little bit smaller. So now we have the $63,995 is our first year's, and $75,740 is the second year's. So now we can go back to the balance sheet and fill those in. So here, deferred tax on current assets, I just say equals, go to my deferred tax schedule, and click on the number. Over here, because it's not just exactly one column over, we have to do it again. Equals deferred tax 75,740, hit enter, and there it's filled in. And remember, we filled in these formulas just copying down. So now that we've got these numbers in here, it's done it correctly all the way across. I've taken care of that, so instead of having it be red, let's have it be black. And now our next problem was the deferred tax on non-current assets. So let's go figure that one out. So we need to come down to the deferred tax on non-current assets. And remember, this is relating to assets that if we sold them at the market value, how much tax would we have to pay on them? Our raised breeding livestock, if you'll remember, it has no basis. We just put a value in there to have our balance sheet not distorted. So the number in the cost based isn't a deduction that we could actually take. And so raised breeding livestock, whatever we sell the market value for, we'd have to pay a taxable gain on the entire amount. So if you say equals, come back to the balance sheet, we need to go to non-current assets, and this is the market value. So our market value here for raised breeding livestock, and hit enter. And the nice thing about this is, so then our taxable gain is the market value minus the cost. And in this case, it doesn't like me to do it because those are X's. So just do that. So just say equals the market value. The next one is the purchase breeding livestock, and this is just like all the other assets. We can deduct what we have, our basis or our tax basis or our book value. So equals on the balance sheet, purchase breeding livestock, the cost is here. And then if we want to fill in the rest of the column, we can just copy that down because all these assets are right underneath it. And again, if you want to check, come down here, buildings and improvements, 30,100. Over here, buildings and improvements, 30,100. Our market basis, those are right underneath there, so we can copy it down. And again, you can take one of these. This is investment in cooperatives, 27,650. Over here, investment in cooperatives, 27,650. So we did it right. And then to get our taxable gain, it's plus the market value, what we sell it for, minus what our book value. And you can copy that down. And here, our buildings and improvement has a negative value because actually, if we sold it for that $5,000, we'd be selling it at a loss and would have a deduction we could take. And that can help offset some of these other gains. Now to find our total taxable gain, say just click there, sum, and it's automatically given us the correct range, so we can just hit enter. There's places to put some things in here if there's special tax code provisions. And in this case, there is nothing. If you want to be really great, you can make it yellow so you know there's places you can type those in if you have something in the tax code. And then our next net taxable assets is those net assets minus these places that we've left to account for special tax code provisions. And then our actual tax that we'd owe is the $440,000 of gain times by the income tax rate. And in this case, it'd be $154,163. And the other one is $162,007. So now coming back to our balance sheet, down on our current liabilities, we have that deferred tax and non-current assets. Remember, it's only in the market-based columns. And I didn't do freeze panes right up here, so I'm going to do that now so you can see it. We're going to go to View, Freeze Panes. Now you'll see my column headings as I go down. And here in the market-based columns, I need to refer to that deferred tax I found. So equals deferred tax, the first year's amount, equals deferred tax, the second year's amount. And so here we see that it filled it in, and then it filled it in these next columns because we already had our formulas there. So now I have figured out deferred tax on non-current assets, so I can make that non-red. And I filled out my balance sheet up to total liabilities.